Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Developers and Podcast, where we talk about everything in the games industry, but from the eyes of two indie devs. My name is Sivash, aka Rainy, and joining me is Sydney, aka Fam. As always, as a co-host.
God, you did that so fast. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of smooth now. Today, it's it's not an How to Indie episode. It's just the one where we talk about everything that's been happening in the industry.
Game news.
And this one kind of extends besides outside of the range of just video games. I think it just kind of goes to general media, where we wanted to talk about AI, right? And
yeah.
I think this discussion was brought up by what's happening with SAG-AFTRA. So first of all, before we get into any of that, I know a lot of people might not even know what SAG-AFTRA is, especially if you're outside of the States or if you don't work in the media or something like that.
That's fair. So quick breakdown. SAG-AFTRA is basically, it's an actors union based out of Hollywood. And the way Hollywood pretty much works is, if you want to make a movie, you don't just hire people, you basically reach out to people who are within these unions, right? So you have SAG-AFTRA, which represents the actors. You've got IATSE, which represents the production people and cameramen and all that stuff. And you've got the Teamsters who handle, moving stuff around and everything. So you work with different unions, and to have a non-union job in Hollywood is kind of frowned upon. It's seen as, you're cutting corners, or maybe it's not quite as safe, or maybe bad things can happen. And so by working with the union, it's kind of saying, we're guaranteeing all these protections and stuff. So
if only games industry was like that.
Don't even get me started.
Unionize.
We're working on it. But so what happened, most people might know what happened with SAG last year, when they went on strike against the Hollywood production companies, basically saying, hey, we need more money, we need better protections from streaming services, and we want to make sure we're making residuals off streaming services, and we want protection from AI and a whole bunch of other stuff. And they finally, thankfully, eventually came to an agreement with the IAIMP, I don't remember. Whatever the group is that represents all of the studios in Hollywood. But now they're trying to settle up their general contract with video games and hit a snag, and the snag is AI. And basically what they're wanting, this is very dumbed down version, and I'm gonna get stuff wrong, so please don't correct us. Or if you want more information, go track down actual information from SAG-AFTRA. They're putting out a whole bunch of info right now. But the basics of it is that they want, in their contracts for doing recordings for video games with the large AAA studios, they want protections from AI in their contracts. And what do we mean by protections from AI? What it basically means is, if the video game studio is going to use their voice or their face or their body or their likeness with AI in any way, shape, or form, the actors deserve the right to say no, or at the very least be informed before they sign the contract that this is something that's going to happen. And
this is obviously regarding generative AI. We're not talking about traditional AI as in, I don't know, artificial intelligence in a game that moves an NPC
we're not
around.
talking about
content creation using AI, pretty much.
Kind of, yeah. We're not talking about, machine learning or database or anything like that. Basically what they want is, I don't know if anybody knows this, but recently, very famously, James Earl Jones has put in his contract that anybody that he has worked with is allowed to use his voice with AI to voice future projects. So that if people want to, Disney wants to continue making, mostly it's with Disney, if Disney wants to continue using his voice for Darth Vader, or using his voice for Mufasa, even though he's not acting anymore, or after he passes away, they can continue to use his voice with AI to allow him to continue voicing projects. And he's okay with that. Some actors aren't. And so what actors want is informed consent for that stuff. Is, are you going to put everything that I've said into some kind of, you know, AI device to then create new lines that I didn't record? And then if I only record this much, but you use it for this much, am I going to get paid for all of this? Or am I only getting paid for this? And so the fear is that that's what's going to happen to actors, is they're not going to get paid for the benefit of their work, which honestly, I think is totally fair.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if you're, so let's look at Neil Newbin, who's, you know, you're a big fan of, you know, if, let's say Stardew Valley mods wanted to voice his little character that they've put into Stardew Valley, and rip off his voice to then sell a mod on Nexus Mods that allows you to put Asterion into your game, well, that's you using his talent to make money. He deserves money for that. So that's the kind of stuff that
there are already some mods that
from.
do stuff like that. I don't want to get into it, but there's a very, very controversial mod for Baldur's Gate which changes the gender of a very specific and important character. And they used AI to completely change the character's voice and even record new lines that, again, I don't want to get into the mod, it's super controversial, and I don't condone it, but they use that too.
And that's kind of, and that's at what point are you taking advantage of the actor who put in all of that work? And there's it's a whole other conversation around, do people deserve to get paid for the things that they do? That's really the heart of the issue. Do we as game developers deserve to get paid for making games? Do actors deserve to get paid for the work that they do? Do artists deserve to get paid for their concept art? And so it's a much bigger conversation, but I think it's interesting from two indie developers to just, you know, because I'll be honest, I do think there could be potential benefits to AI, and especially there was an article we were looking at from Games Industry Biz talking about, you know, here are ways that you can do it responsibly. And I think that's kind of the important part is, okay, if we're going to do it, we need to be responsible about it. And I feel like that's how it is with all video game production. If we're going to make a game where you can kill people, we need to be responsible about it. If you're going to make a game where you can interact with wild animals, we need to be responsible about it. Like there's a responsibility with everything that we do, and I think AI is just another one. But there was a really interesting part to that article where they were basically talking about how AI is not new. Like, it's something that's, you know, it's been worked on at least since the 1950s, and so it's feeling like a newer problem because it's becoming a bit more of a household conversation. I
did read that article. It's a little bit, I don't know. I think the devil's in details, right?
Of course.
Just AI in general, yes, of course, has existed for such a long time. We have software and tools that use AI akin and not generative. That's the exact opposite of the topic that we're talking about. But machine learning algorithms to generate things for you. We use it for vortexes and volumes such as smoke and water flows and flow maps and all that. SpeedTree is a very prominent software in AAA. And as well as Houdini, and they use machine learning and stuff to generate trees that look very realistic and even create 3D models using certain instructions that it can then evolve itself and build upon. So no, in that sense, it's nothing new. I think the part that a lot of people, a lot of artists, myself included, have problem with is specifically generative AI.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of these companies aren't doing it with respect to the source material. We know what happened with ArtStation, where ArtStation was used to, people could just put AI art over there, but a lot of the actual art that was there was used to train these models. And especially if you look on Twitter, you'll see there are tons of artists that repost an art that some AI artist, I don't really want to use that term, posted, and it's literally a carbon copy of something that they had worked on themselves, with just different looking bits and pieces to it. Because at the end of the day, generative AI doesn't actually understand what it's doing. It's regurgitating data that it's getting and putting it onto a canvas. And that is the biggest point of it. That is the problem.
That's the heart of the problem, really, is what are you using to train AI? And that's it. And if you're using the entire internet, the people who've, I've been posting stuff on the internet since I was 10, 11, 12. And, you look at something like fanfiction.net, which is just this huge resource of, people writing. And the idea that you could pull from that to then generate new stories is undermining the artistry and the time and the effort that these people have gone through to write these things. And same thing with art. I do think you can be responsible about it, and I think it could have its place, but I think the general issue is that, kind of like we've talked about before, where video games as an entity are kind of being ruined by the capitalist mentality of, well, it's all about making the money. I feel like the same thing's happening with the AI. It's not about let's do this responsible. Yeah, it's everything. There was another great link that, or quote from somebody named Tommy Thompson, a great name, in this Games Industry Biz article. So the problem is that this conversation around AI and video games is often being led by people who don't work in games. They're trying to sell an AI product. And it's like, that's the heart of
trying
it,
to sell an AI product is like a new plague. It's like the new NFT or the new crypto, because, I follow MKBHD a lot. Marquez Brownlee, he makes tons of tech videos. He's the most popular tech YouTuber and trustworthy. And he recently reviewed 2 AI products. One was the Rabbit R1, which is a little tiny orange device that's only AI, and it like answers questions and stuff, look at things for you. And there's another one is called Humane AI Pin, which is like a pin that sits in
I remember that one. Yeah.
But if you watch those reviews, he also makes it very clear that AI in this form is still very much in its infancy, and a lot of these companies are just pushing out a product that is not ready, or it's not doing what it promises to do. And a lot of it is starting to look so similar to Web3 promises or crypto replacing
how can we make money as fast as we possibly can with as little work as possible.
Remember how much hype was around NFTs, that is going to change and revolutionize the future? Ubisoft jumping on the bandwagon and actually making NFTs out of in-game items, and then who's talking about it now? I don't think the same thing is going to happen with AI, but these companies are going to dissolve because they're putting these products out and people are just seeing how underwhelming it can be. Now, to just steer the discussion back, sorry, if you wanted to add to it.
What I was basically going to say is, if we take the whole money-making crap out of it, if we look at some of the other things that have kind of been popping up around AI, for instance, there was another article about former Activision staff, being told essentially that, AI wasn't going to replace them and everything was going to be fine. And then next thing you know, people are being trained on AI, and it's kind of like, well, what's the truth? And I think, as indie developers, I think AI would benefit people like us the most.
That's true.
Because you can use it to kind of replace production costs. Whereas if you're looking at like a AAA studio, if they're just looking to cut costs, then it means that people don't get jobs. With an indie studio, it's kind of like, well, we don't have the money to hire people, So we have to be creative and cut corners and do the things that we have to do to get the game made the way we want it to get made. Whereas in a AAA studio, they're cutting that and doing all that stuff just so they can make extra money.
Yeah.
And it's not about the fact they can't hire people, they just don't want to.
Yeah.
So if I look at an indie studio for us, let's say we did want to use AI. I'm not saying we would or we're going to, but what are some ways that we would use it to make video game production more accessible to people who want to make games but don't necessarily have the money to hire artists or hire whatever? What are some ways that it could be used responsibly?
I think there's one area that I think AI is very good at, and I think there isn't any problem of using it that way, and that is the fact that sometimes AI is a lot better than a search engine. Especially if you're a programmer or somebody who's working with technical stuff, a technical artist or something, and you have a very specific question about a very specific query in an engine or something, asking an AI often gives you better results, especially with the newest models that can actually search the internet, rather than having to go through and look at different articles. Another use case is brainstorming. A lot of the teams are solo, and you don't have somebody that is on the same wavelength as you or doesn't understand it, so you can just tell the AI what your idea is, where your mindset is, and then you can just back and forth with it, and it'll help you kind of realize your idea better, because it'll just act as a bit of a springboard for you, a soundboard for you. Now sometimes it doesn't here's the thing, it doesn't challenge you often, which is the problem, part of the problem.
It's also just very dumb.
It just kind of echoes back positive stuff to you, but it doesn't mean you can't come up with ideas. I have brainstormed with AI about a D&D campaign that I ran, and it gave me some ideas, and funny enough, it wasn't even actually directly saying that. It just said a sentence. I was like, oh wait, I could turn that into an idea. But it works really well as a
it's the same as having a conversation with like a friend where for instance, Kevin and my partner and we're both ADHD, and we both like to, it's called body doubling for each other, where let's say I need to clean the kitchen. I don't really need his help, but for some reason having him there talking to me while I'm doing it just makes it go by easier. And it's little things like that it's just having somebody to, even if they don't know anything about what you're talking about, I can throw ideas about a story at Kevin, and just by asking me questions, he can help me propel those ideas. And it's a very similar thing. There are two places in writing SunnySide's script where I've used brainstorming with, it was ChatGPT. One was coming up with drinks recipes.
Oh, right.
For so if in SunnySide, if you hang out with our character Josh, he owns the bar, the more you hang out with him, he'll give you recipes for drinks. Now I wrote the recipes, those are my recipes. I haven't tested them yet, but I need to, because the thing is some of them use very like quintessentially Japanese ingredients I don't have access to. So I went on to ChatGPT and it was kind of like, hey, can you give me just lists of Japanese like cocktails? Just so I can see what ingredients get used more commonly. And then from there it was, okay, I want these to be, thematically musical. Can you give me ideas for drink names that would use music as a theme? And then kind of going through and going, well, that one's dumb, but I like the word from this one, I like the word from this one. Okay, I can mash those two together. How do I use those to influence a drink? And so, it took what could have ended up being a week of research and studying and reproducing, and trim that down into a couple of hours of me just kind of tooling around and going, okay, what are some ideas that I could use for this? And then another one was, as I was doing all the romances, I was quickly running out of ideas on how to make these things unique, especially for some of the characters that I didn't feel like had as robust of a storyline. So at one point I was like, hey, can you give me some good date ideas?
Just chat.
Like, what does a good date look like? And then I just kind of, okay, oh, that'd be cool. Okay, we could do that. Let's try that. Let's, what would this person do if they were on this? And then I could just kind of continue the writing process off of that. But I think those are responsible uses. You know, the AI is not doing the work for you. It's propelling you to be more creative by giving you different ideas. Now, I do think there is a way that generative AI could be useful to indie studios.
Yeah.
So, for instance, now we didn't do this, but looking back on it, I wonder if it could have been an option where, you know, with Kaori and how much art she had to produce for the game, to the point where it was physically straining on her and it was a lot of work and she crunched a lot and it was very difficult. Could we have created some kind of a generative thing, trained it on her art style, put in the portraits, and then just put in, okay, can you change the facial expressions? To
just
take
using
some of the
her
pressure,
art as a source.
Just her art as the source, Or, you know, could you have a concept artist who you pay for all of their work, but make their life a little bit easier by, okay, you do the concept work, but we need more production off of it. Let's say we want portraits with different poses or something, you know. Could we have, again, trained it off of Kaori's concept art from a few different perspectives? She then only has to do, say, 3 drawings, but we could use generative AI to create, you know, 100 portraits off of that or something. And then still pay her the full salary that she's worth, but reducing her workload. So that's the kind of thing, like, I feel like that would be a responsible use for it, because it's overall to the benefit of the artist. And you're not ripping off anybody's work and anything like that.
See, the core issue with generative AI is really 2 things. One is that if it would replace somebody who would be having that role, either financially or just generally experience or the role. And 2 is not knowing the source of where the art's coming from. And then just like, because it can be, like I said, it can be a copy of an artist that doesn't know is their art being used, and that's just the wrong thing. That's the main 2 issues with it. And it doesn't just mean 2D art, by the way. Tons of D&D books have been used as source for writing in generative text for ChatGPT. So if you're having ChatGPT generate dialogue for you, just verbatim dialogue that you just put directly into your game, that could be problematic. It's don't keep in mind that it could be grabbing from writers that did not want to get. If you want ideas, like Sydney said, that's absolutely fine. Go for it. And if you want to talk about micro teams, like a solo developer. Let's say a solo developer wants to work on a project and they need to create some art for an environment, a background. Here's my recommendation. And if you're just a solo dev, you have 0 budget project, and you're just doing this as a hobby, try doing it yourself. Because here's the thing. You don't know. It might become a passion for you. You might find it very interesting, very exciting, and it would be a new skill for you. So try seeing if you can make the art yourself at first. If you see that there's absolutely no way that you can do it, because here's another problem with generative AI is that it immediately replaces people's thinking processes, and instead of people trying to be creative and think out of the box, it's just that one option and just go for it. If you can't, then sure, go use ChatGPT and generative AI if you want to for the background art. But if your project does take off either after production or before production, I think it's the responsible thing to hire an artist to replace those arts that have been created.
Now, let's say solo dev, you don't have the money. You're not an artist. You're not an artist. Like, you know, you're good at technical art. You're really good at technical art, but you're not going to sit down and draw a 2D background for something. So let's say something that we had really liked about Persona was how they had used those background 2D kind of paintings for a lot of their environments. So let's say you, as a solo dev, really wanted that look, that background 2D, and we didn't do it because we didn't have an artist to do it. That was why, you know, and it also, you know, didn't fit the whole open world thing. So let's say you wanted to create a game that had those kinds of 2D backdrops. What if you went into Unreal and made those settings in a 3D environment, took pictures of them, Then you use that to train the AI model and say, I want this background, this setting based off what this looks like.
Yeah.
And then you can use those images to make your other settings and your other backgrounds.
I see what you're saying now. Okay.
That would be a responsible use. It's your idea, it's your artistry, and what you're using the AI for is production, is for the creation of more work that you wouldn't hire somebody else to do because you don't have the money and you don't have the budget and you don't have whatever. And that would be a way for you to kind of continue. Corridor Crew, who we talk about all the time, shout out to Corridor Crew, they did something very similar that tons of respect for. They made an anime.
Oh, yeah, I saw that, yeah.
AI. And it's so cool. And, you know, there's some weirdness to it because it's AI. And I think they did use an anime specifically, a particular anime or a particular video game to train the AI. So in that way, kind of whatever. Yeah. But it was one set that they gave it. Instead of like, hey, just use all of the internet. It was use this specific art style. And that's how they did their backgrounds. They went into Unreal. They made an environment in Unreal and then took 2D snapshots of it. Right. And then that's what they used to put the anime together. So there are ways to do it responsibly, but I think the heart of it is always going to be, what are you using to train it? And are you using your own work to train it? I think if you're using your own work or somebody you've paid to train the AI, obviously consent from the person who gave you the original art. If you hired somebody, hey, I'm going to use this to train some AI, is probably the polite thing to do. And then go from there. So as long as you're not stealing other people's IP or hard work, and as long as you're not using it to replace people that you could have or would have hired. So, you know, when we're in the AAA environment, they can afford it. Yeah. They can afford to hire the people to do the work. When you're in the indie environment, most of us, you know, we start out, this is a part-time job, or this is a side hustle, or it's something that we're trying to get going, or maybe it takes 6 years to, you know, actually make you any money, if ever at all. And it's more, I think there's a bit more wiggle room at that point. Yeah. Than, you know, people losing jobs in the higher end. So I think it's an interesting topic. I think the takeaway I would say is, you know, I don't think anything is black and white, honestly. And I don't think you can make the blanket statement of all AI art is bad. Most of it, yeah, probably. If it's AI art coming out of some big money making, you know, art AI, then yeah, probably not great. It's probably pulling from other artists who didn't get consent. But if you're putting in the work to train it yourself, I don't think that's such a terrible thing, honestly. Yeah, at that point, it becomes just another tool for you to use alongside. Exactly, yeah. That's kind of, yeah. And with that, we are going to end this episode. There will be an extended version of this, which we're going to record right after this. But thank you so much for listening to us for this episode of the Developers and Podcast. We're going to be back next week on another episode of How to Indie. And if you would like to actually listen to the extended versions of these podcasts, you can support us on Patreon. There's a link down below. And lastly, the game that we have just released last month is called SunnySide. It's now up on Steam. If you'd like to check it out, there's a link down in the description as well. And there's no AI art in SunnySide. There's really nothing AI in SunnySide. No AI art in SunnySide. Just some brainstorming, and that's it. We'll see you all next week on How to Indie. Bye, guys. Bye.